ora tātou. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm delighted to welcome our experts tonight. We have Jean Rockel, who is an honorary academic at the University of Auckland, and she presents her research at conferences and seminars, and she's a strong advocate for infant teachers, as I'm sure you know. She also really enjoys online discussions on social media. So thanks for joining us tonight, Jean.
Kia ora.
We also have Emma Thomsen. Emma is a teacher at Tots Corner Early Learning Centre, and she's been a teacher for about 12 years now, at first teaching university entrance in fine arts, and then for the last 5 years in early childhood education. So she has got postgrad diplomas in both fine arts and early childhood education, and she's been exploring communication and relationship building in her practice alongside her colleagues. So again, thanks for joining us, Emma.
Kia ora, Vicky. Thank you.
We're going to be talking tonight about trustful relationships. So I'm going to turn to you, Jean, first, if I may, and ask, what do you mean by trustful relationships?
Well, having a strong trustful relationship in a co-teaching situation is where support is offered and given, sometimes without even talking about it. Community of learning, positive social interactions are part of being a role model to children, and there's consistency and reliability and what the teachers show that helps to build trust. So it's developing a mutual respect for each other and acknowledging each other's talents. That's key. What motivated me to talk about it, when I observed Emma with her group of infants and toddlers and co-teacher, and her co-teacher was kneeling beside a child and working through a stressful conflict situation where one child wanted a gumboot that belonged to the other child and there was a tug of war. But as the teacher was working through this situation, I saw Emma quietly move over, sitting on her knees too, offering her presence, not saying anything, just being there. This was intuitive support for both teacher and child, and it got me thinking. This isn't often written about in the literature, but seeing it in practice was really inspiring. So relational skills don't automatically mature like language and motor skills. It's not a biological given. They are learned, and children need an environment where they're encouraged, and children are empowered to value this. But it's the quality of the relationship that's required, and this can create an environment that's safe or unsafe. Safe from being judged, or unsafe where you're fearful. And we strive for this with children, but we also need to strive for this with each other. So you can imagine how corrosive it would be if teachers and children felt unsafe or fearful.
Absolutely, Jean. Sorry, I just want to, I'm very sorry to interrupt, but we are having quite a bit of feedback. So if there are people listening tonight who maybe have their microphones on, if you're just listening, please mute your microphone and we'll see if that can fix the problem. We're getting an awful lot of feedback. So yeah, you should have a little mute button in the corner, the left-hand corner of your screen. Try muting your microphones and we'll see if we can hear you better, Jean. Sorry about that.
Okay.
So thank you, Jean, for that kind of overview. So you mentioned one thing that you'd observed was Emma kneeling next to her colleague to offer some support, and that's what I was wondering. What sorts of things would we see and hear in a centre where trustful relationships between teachers are authentic and genuine?
Is that me?
Pick up on that, Emma?
I can. Right. What would you see? Well, you know, Jean picked up on, you know, that my silent moment and thought, what is that? And you know, for me and Emily, it was months of process of coming together and sharing our beliefs, our ideas, our thoughts, talking about the philosophy. So what you would see in a centre might not be what's going on in the background. So there's got to be a lot of discussion between the teachers to come together to start with. there's got to, and you've got to develop a sense of interpersonal risk, if you will, where it's okay to say how you feel. It's okay to not always agree on something. How are you going to disagree? How are you going to come together? How to talk and have, playfully talk about things, such that you're creating a robust relationship that will support times of change and times of difficulty. Yeah, I mean, and in that instance with Emily, for example, I would have chopped my arms off if I could have. That would have helped, because there was that deep sense of empathy and trust and respect for each other that we've developed. Does that help?
Yes.
I can go on and on. Wow.
Yes. Well, I think the fact that you say that people can disagree with each other, and that this, I like the idea of that sort of camaraderie where people can joke with each other, and I think you would be able to sense those authentic relationships. Thank you. So again, why is trust so important for well-being? Why did you pick up on this idea of trust?
I think for me, our understandings are definitely informed by neuroscience, and the foundation for children to develop basic trust happens in the first year of life with adults. And if it's not strong, it's fragile for the rest of life. You can't get it from a peer. So the quality of an adult's relationship with a child in the centre is imperative. And according to Dr. Simon Rowley at the Brainwave Trust, he states the relationship becomes a template for all of our relationships in our future, and is therefore very important that it's a secure one that we can trust and know that the carer is there for us at all times. And this also provides resilience in hard times. So of course, trust and wellbeing must be a curriculum priority. If not, learning doesn't happen easily. But modelling is a powerful tool for children learning, and I think the adult provides that model where children are valued as active learners in a climate of listening. So there's no magic wand, but a process to work through as individuals practice listening and you're paying attention. So you've got to prepare yourself not to be judgmental and biased, but to be truly honest. And I guess that's typical of communication skills. We're trying to be honest with our expression of thoughts. As Emma was saying, you can agree to disagree, but you need to have that level of deeper communication, and therefore the trustful relationship.
Just in case mine's gone.
Sorry, what's that? Oops.
Oh dear, we've just lost. Sorry for the technical issues we're having tonight. We've just lost Emma. We'll, if you continue, Jean, we'll hopefully get her back in just a second.
Yes, I think she's popped back.
For a minute. Sorry, I don't know what's on. Sorry. I had a.
So, Vicky was just saying, why is trust so important for well-being?
Definitely for me, just jumping in here, connections. There's no quality connections without trust, and connections is for me at the heart of well-being. So for me, it's a no-brainer. And as Jean was saying, children are looking to us and how we interact with our peers every day. We are asking them to, have quality interactions with their peers. What are they seeing? How, because our days are full of stress. We're dealing with multiple children, multiple needs, multiple subjectivities. It's the perfect time and example for them to see how they should deal with stress, how they should cope in situations that just land upon them sometimes.
I think that's very important, because I remember years ago learning that infants are particularly astute observers, and what they first of all, they want to see what is the relationship like between their parent and the teacher. But I think what Emma has said also, know what's the relationship between teachers too. I think we underestimate infants. We don't think they take much notice of these things, but they are I think, incredibly astute observers. So I think that's something to remember.
Absolutely. Okay, so how do teachers go about actually creating these trustful relationships with each other? Emma, how has that happened at your centre?
Well, I've been really grappling with this question because, you know, for example, what happened with me and Emily and how we developed our trustful relationship with each other. Perhaps, I definitely wouldn't have changed how that happened, but I don't know if it's completely replicatable. But in the centre, we believe in dealing with knots and complexities and being okay with that. You know, be okay with the fact you don't disagree, that you do disagree, and really value your co-teachers. You value their strengths, use them, collaborate with them, have time to have communication with each other to start with. And you've really got to not rush these things. I think that's really vital. We give a lot of time to these sorts of connections.
Yes.
And alongside of that, just personally, I think quality trustful relationships needs you to be deeply personally reflective. So you need to go out and break cycles of, oh, you said, you never, blaming other people, and using language that's not encouraging other people's growth and other people's learning. You know, we've got to take responsibility for that kind of language between each other. And it's pretty easy to go out and find some TED Talks on empathy and TED Talks on compassionate communication, for example, and start using that in your everyday language.
Yes, yes. I mean, no one said it was going to be easy. And I think that when, as you referred to before, it's a very busy world that infant teachers are involved with. And it's all very well to say, keep calm and carry on, but it's not easy. And I always feel that infant teachers are the most important teachers, of course, in the education sector. And it is very challenging. But doing reading and sharing these ideas so that when you've got that relationship, when you arrive back on Monday morning after the weekend and you can say, hey, I read something or I saw something online that was absolutely amazing, and you share these ideas, you just get a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper rather than struggling on your own.
I definitely agree with Jean. I think shared purpose and shared learning is a great way just to start and to keep going. You know, never stop sharing with each other.
Open those channels of communication, you know, talk about the deep and meaningful things.
But also having fun. And I mean, I do remember on the walls of the Diana School in Reggio Emilia is written a quote from Malaguzzi, nothing without joy. So I think that at the end of the day, when you've had an exhausting day, if you take a few minutes to think, well, what were the joyful moments there in that day? And of course, during the day, you can share them with your co-teacher as well. But I do think we have to remember that the relationship between adults and infants, has got to be a quality one. I know it's easy to say that, isn't it? You know, we've got low wages, we've got all the worries with COVID, etc. But we just do our best. That's all we can do, do our best.
Absolutely. So I'm hearing from you that it's from you particularly, Emma, that it's sort of coming with a particular attitude, open and reflective attitude to your work with colleagues. I'd like to at this moment to invite questions from our people watching tonight, but also to ask, are there particular features of the context or conditions that are important for allowing these trustful relationships to emerge?
I think the biggest one's actually giving teachers autonomy, giving them trust, your co-teachers, or from management down. I don't know if it makes sense, but trust begets trust. And I'm really lucky where I work. I'm given a lot of autonomy to to develop relationships. We're not, you know, forced into anything or micromanaged into anything. It's allowed to develop naturally, and I think that's really important.
I think that's really important. The support you get from management is quite critical, really. And I worry about situations where that support isn't there, because it's a battle otherwise. There's no answer for that one, but we all have our own process of working through, and there aren't any easy recipes. It's just something that you work at.
Yeah, definitely working at it. Yeah, you've got to utilize strengths and even management strengths and weaknesses. You have to work with those just as you would anyone else's.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's very wise, Emma. Very wise. I absolutely agree with that, because none of us are perfect and we're all human, but we do have certain skills, and if we are valued for those rather than what we can't do, and the same with management, value what they are giving us that works, and supporting them when we can.
I'm going to just interrupt, Jean. It's quite hard to hear some of what you're saying. We're getting quite a bit of feedback, I think, from your computer. You don't happen to have two microphones operating, or you don't have Zoom open twice?
I'm just going to make myself mute. Does that make any difference at all? I'm going to speak when I turn it off.
No, that's fine. I think that you've obviously only got the one running because we can't hear you. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we really want to hear what you're saying tonight. And I wanted to see if we could in any way improve the quality of the audio. Okay, I'll just turn to the questions that are coming through. What do you do if there are teachers that are finding it difficult to work in this way? Emma, I think you started to talk about this a little bit in that you talked about the way that you bring yourself to these situations. So how would you manage if there was a teacher that you were finding particularly difficult to create a trustful relationship with, a teacher that was not appearing to want to be very inclusive?
Yeah, it can be really hard, and it can be something to take home and worry about forever and a day. I understand. I think you've got to try and make some kind of connection, and especially think, okay, well, what's going on for them, and be curious about what's happening for them. I think that's probably the most important part, because if you can humanize and connect with how they're feeling, then you can give a space to that. It's when we don't understand, we're like, oh, and we get frustrated and we get confused and we can get disempowered. I would say just reach out, try and understand how they are.
Yes. Yes, and there is a cultural dimension here too. And I remember learning with horror that my Māori colleague, because I was older, she didn't want to seemingly contradict me or speak up. And I was horrified to know that, because I never dreamt that was like that. So I guess, you know, there's also our cultural positions we have to find out about as well.
And someone on the chat has mentioned about for all teachers to feel a strong sense of belonging to a centre. So is that something that you can work on if you feel that relationships aren't going well for you and your team? How can you improve a teacher's sense of belonging, a colleague's sense of belonging?
Yes, well, I used to love going out together outside the centre, because there never seems to be much time within a busy day. But if you're going on a picnic, or if you're doing something outside centre hours, you have a better chance of getting to know them. What do you think, Emma?
Well, I put an equitable sense of belonging right at the top of, you know, how you would start a trustful relationship with someone. It's a lot easier with someone who's coming into the centre. You can start out by saying, hey, this is your space too. How is that person represented in the space? It's exactly the same as you would with a child. is the child represented in the space? And you do exactly the same thing with a teacher. You know, if they speak a different language, is that visible? Is their picture visible? If they want to change something on the wall, can they? What's their sense of autonomy in the space? I think that's really, really important. That sense of belonging. There's lots of ways as co-teachers we can really encourage people to feel that in the rooms that they work in.
It's just as you say, as you would do it for a child and the new family coming in. Sometimes I think all of the things that we strive for with children, we can also strive for us too.
Absolutely. When I was rereading, I think I told you, when I was reading a little bit, you know, that start in Te Whāriki where it talks about children being capable and competent, just word that for yourself. And it's so empowering. I'd never done it before, and I've been in this for a few years now, and I was like, wow, that's empowering for me. And we give that to children all the time and not to ourselves.
Yes. We certainly we're not doing enough to care for ourselves and to know that we are competent and that we have strengths because somebody supports us in those strengths. It's very powerful.
Yes, I think those, as you've mentioned, the things that we know so much about helping children develop trust and develop feelings of belonging, and just transferring those principles across. What do you feel questions come through about being a reliever or being a practicum student, and how in those sort of more temporary situations is it possible to build these kind of trustful relationships, and how would you go about doing so?
Do you want to start with that one, Jean?
I'd be most interested to hear what you say.
Oh, yeah. Well, trusting relationships do take time. That's the nature of them. But I think it's a fantastic opportunity for students to take that vulnerable step, to say how they're feeling, what they believe in. You know, a lot of students, you're brand new and you can feel all of that insecurities you might have, and to make yourself vulnerable to your people that are marking you. That's quite a big step. I think it's probably a lot on the centre that you go to that I feel like should be embracing the students as much as possible, so they know what that feels like. What does it feel like to have a sense of belonging as well? I think there's a partnership that should happen there, an equitable one.
I guess it's challenging with relievers unless you have that ongoing relationship and have a permanent reliever, if you're lucky enough to be able to do that. Because, I mean, it'd be hard from a reliever's point of view, coming in and not feeling that sense of belonging at all, because maybe that reliever goes to lots of other centres. It just goes to show how challenging and how hard it is to quickly make that gain that feeling of I'm part of this place too. And I guess all you can do is just be as welcoming. I mean, never underestimate body language, I always think, because if people are smiling and also just generally having an open body language, that goes a long way in helping a reliever perhaps coming into a strange situation.
I think when it comes to relievers, I think when I was talking, it was definitely orientated towards students. For relievers, oh gosh, I'm thinking about my own room and how I would like, to include relievers a little bit more. It's definitely, I think it's on us to make sure that they feel like they're welcome. But yeah, I think you're right, Jean. It's definitely, being welcoming and your gestures, and not to be fake, especially with fake, and it's terrible, but with infants and toddlers, there are good judgments of where people are emotionally at, and so if you can just relax and just be yourself, no matter what that is, children will appreciate that. Infants and toddlers, they soak that up.
I think I think it's interesting, Emily kind of alluded to some of the pressures that are on teachers, and sometimes, you know, there's so many things going on. Yeah, so do you think that can have an impact on teacher well-being, and then that teacher well-being then have an impact on the relationships and the quality of relationships between teachers?
Sorry, Vicky, could you just rephrase that one for me?
Well, just that, you know, with all, if teachers are feeling particularly stressed in their roles, sometimes there's a lot of pressure on teachers, and that might affect their own individual sense of well-being, which I'm presuming is then going to have an impact on teacher relationships.
Yeah.
So would you say well-being was also a crucial part of this equation?
Absolutely. I think what me and Emily developed was quite interesting. We developed a sense of tag teaming. So I don't know what that means to anyone else just at the moment. To me, it meant that I could trust Emily to like rescue me a little bit, or like say, hey, I need rescuing, please. Please, you know, you stick your hand up, tag me out right now. Because you need that sometimes, you know. And I really appreciated that between our relationship.
Yes. I mean, I think sometimes it's tricky in terms of personal baggage, if you like. So then somebody comes in from home and they're really emotionally too stressed, and yet they obviously have turned up and they're hoping to work. So I guess it's that sensitivity of the partner teacher being able to see something's not quite right here and offering help in some way, a bit of time out or whatever. I mean, it's this communication. It's got to be done really sensitively, so that if you do feel that they have concerns, you have to listen. Obviously, you have to listen fully. Yeah.
I mean, hopefully within you're right, hopefully within that trusting relationship, you know, there's a daily connecting. It's a daily process. You don't just build a trusting relationship and never have to worry about it again. Exactly. It's a daily practice, and part of that should definitely turn out going, oh, I've just dealt with children. Traffic was horrendous. I haven't slept properly in 3 nights. You know, and your teacher can go, hey, I'm so glad you were here. Please go, just have a cup of tea. Make me one while you're there. Have a rest. You know.
That's right. That's right. It's doing those little supportive things, just on a daily basis. Yeah, I agree.
Okay, thank you. Another question, how do teachers, how do you build a culture in a centre where teachers are able to be collaborative in this way, and you move away from this kind of, well, these are things we've got to get done today, and looking at these deeper underlying things like relationship building, especially if teachers are feeling stressed, or you know, ratios and group sizes are not optimal.
I think for me it would be the importance of staff meetings, to have opportunities where the staff are nurtured, you know, given a meal if that's necessary, but actually supported and being able to talk more openly in a staff meeting. For example, I've heard Emma say that the staff have sat down and watched a video from, was it the Conscious Collective, you said, Emma?
Oh yeah, over lockdown. That was kind of in our own homes. We came back together and moments.
Right.
I think we had a Facebook page as well where we could talk about the things that we were doing, which was really helpful as well.
Yeah, well, maybe we've learned something from lockdown. Maybe we can look at some of these things, and then in the staff meeting come together and say, what did you think of that? You know, and discussing.
In our staff meetings, though, we do try and make a really a point of sharing our learning. Pretty much, you know, at the start of every meeting, it's like, hey, what are you doing? And sharing that with everyone. And as everyone's really interested in it, helps you automatically build a sense of connection, being on the same page. It doesn't matter if the other person's working with the 4-year-olds and you're working with 1-year-olds. There really needs to be a cohesive, trusting relationships over the entire centre.
Yes, well, I really liked what you said about sharing the learning that you've had from your day or your week or whatever. And I think that's a really positive way of understanding someone, because if you're wanting to achieve collaboration, then that's going to give you a lot more insight.
Do you think you could bring the children into this as well, talking about the children as the foundation of these principles for why we should be working in these ways? Because obviously, you know, we're advocating them for children to have their needs met in the best way that we can, if we ourselves as teachers are the best that we can be.
Yeah, I think it's about knowing why you're there in that job. And obviously, there's a lot expected of you. You're expected to understand Te Whāriki, and you're expected to know all the other ins and outs, as well as the children. But if you find that nothing without joy, if you actually find the joy in children, I think that you are learning. It reminds me of Rockel, which is the learner teaching and the teacher learning. And I think if you've got that sort of relationship with the children and with the adults, then it's going to work. My view.
Yeah, thank you. So Jean, also another thing I want to pick up on is how you mentioned about being culturally responsive, and how can we, you know, are there some general principles for being more culturally responsive with each other? How do we address some of those issues, as you mentioned, where the expectations and the ability to be open and honest might actually be culturally inappropriate in some situations?
Wow, that's a very challenging question actually for me, because having been in the ivory tower for many years, I haven't had the practical experiences. I mean, I guess it still gets down to moments of trying to understand that other and give respect to the other person. If it's you've got to build that respect. That's mutual. So I guess just asking, you know, what are you? Yeah, if they don't want to share their thoughts, you take it slowly until you get to know each other well enough to be a little bit more open. I don't know, Emma, what do you think?
Well, I think the key there is definitely taking it slowly, but not dismissing it. Yeah. Like there's a difference between slow and I'll get to it later.
Yeah.
I think when I've been in these situations, I think it's a matter of investing yourself in someone else's culture. Like, make yourself uncomfortable.
Yes.
How does that feel? You know, like try a little bit of their language, try a little bit of their culture, and see how that feels, and talk to them about it. Yes. Because they're going to be really open in those little moments when you're making yourself uncomfortable and you're bringing yourself back. People appreciate that, I find, generally.
Yes. Because you're learning Russian and Mandarin at the moment, aren't you?
Yeah, among other things.
To support your families, you know, because it isn't just another teacher, of course, it's the families.
And I think in that respect, you know, when you learn how to write a child's name in their own language, this could be the co-teacher's name. What is that? Because they're showing you what it is in English. What is it actually in their language? Yes. And when you learn that, that's, you know, that's big, and that means a lot to people.
Yes.
Could there be some value in talking about why you want to be open and honest, particularly if that's something, you know, you need to talk about why is that even valued, I suppose, as in some cultures it's not valued. You know, we don't really want to be having open and honest conversations as it's impolite. So talking about why you might actually want to unpack that a bit more.
I guess in a way you can be honest and say, I don't understand some of the things that you're talking about, and maybe it's I don't know, it's just about appearing to be willing to learn a learner, and not push your own barrow, but trying to come together through something perhaps that you mutually believe in. So maybe through the children rather than adult teacher, maybe understanding the curriculum in some way.
And perhaps this nurturing trustful relationships in some ways might come down to the philosophy of the early childhood centre. Do you think that? Yeah,
I think this is the key. I think it's really important to all discuss the philosophy, and if it's like an Emma situation, inspiration from Reggio Emilia, is that right, Emma? How do you find that? Is that something that together?
Yeah, I'm struggling just to hear Jean a little bit, but what I'm gathering is, so from the Reggio Emilia philosophy, there's a lot about connecting with families and communities on a partnership level. So there's an equal or equitable agreement about what education looks like. And just to sort of like touch on what you were talking about before, I think, when you're dealing with other cultures about being open and honest, what that might look like, I think just give them a few examples can really help. So like find a child that's just reading my notes, I'm sorry on this one, but are they expressing who they are through their learning? Can you see their identity motivate them, push them forward in their own learning? And that's part of the Reggio Emilia as well. Like children have their own strategies to learn, and that's what teachers are picking up on. That's what teachers are documenting, and that's what teachers are supporting. So you could share that with people that might not understand what it is you're doing.
And in Reggio Emilia, they also talk about the image of the teacher as well. So presumably, that's another thing that could be discussed, is your image of the child and the teacher and relationships, and what they should ideally look like, what we're aiming for. Yeah.
Okay, it's not easy getting to know other people's value systems, but I do think that if we try, sure, we may make mistakes, and we haven't done something, well, we hope it's being insensitive, but I guess I agree with what Emma was saying before, through the language of a person from another culture that you don't understand, learning some words of language surely is a huge start. Genuinely trying to learn. I don't mean just tokenistic, but genuinely trying to build that bridge of communication that way.
I think what I've seen through it is that what culture value, it comes through the language, and it comes through how they put sentences together and the words they have for things. And by learning a few words, by learning a bit of the language, you can really gain a sense of what's about culture, if you will. It's really eye-opening. It's fun and inspiring. It's not just hard work, I think.
No, that's right.
Little plug for language.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Just for the last 5 minutes of our webinar tonight, I want to turn to whether this idea of trustful relationships is important across all members of the centre community, and particularly for children, and how can you translate some of what you've been talking about tonight for building those trustful relationships with children?
Building trustful relationships for children. Well, I think it's so big. I'm sorry. Right. Okay. So, I had to have it written down. Each of us shows up every day for children because it's what we do. But unless you're showing up for each other, are you really, should be showing up? Oh, wow, I've lost that one. Sorry.
No.
Just that, what am I trying to say? Is that we're doing something for children, and that's our shared purpose. But unless we're showing up for each other, we're not really doing justice to the children. We're not really doing our best. We're just pretending if we're just showing up for children. We've got to show up for teachers as well.
Well,
Sorry, really long-winded.
No, I think that's very profound, actually. That's why I wanted to do something like this, talking with a practitioner. Experience counts so much that this isn't the sort of thing that you can just read in a book. I mean, obviously, the things you read in books are going to spur discussion. But what you said then, turning up for each other, as well as turning up for the children, I think if we can do that, we'll be a long way towards having relationships.
I agree. Thank you, Emma. It did make a lot of sense. And
I did just to add on there, I think the first ones we should make are with parents. Just the first trustful relationships we build should be with parents. So from a teacher of infants and toddlers, because when parents feel comfortable, their children will feel comfortable, and then we build relationships with children.
Yes.
Absolutely. So a lot of what we've been talking about tonight, although we haven't specifically talked about children or families, but a lot of the communication strategies that you've talked about are about effective ways of communicating with adults in order to create trustful relationships. And so I think that a lot of what you've been saying can be translated to those other relationships that I agree, Emma, are very, very important too.
And I think our working environments give us a great chance to play at that, because it's really no one comes to work with expert knowledge on how to make relationships. We've all got different things. We're all trying to learn from a different perspective, but our teaching teams can give us a chance to play and a chance to learn what those could be, and then we sort of give that to families and children. So our co-teachers can be safe places to learn about those sorts of things.
Yes,
that's very true.
Yes, they can be, but if things don't work, I still think that, there's always that risk, isn't there? I guess that's the thing in education, always taking a risk. And if things don't go right, don't give up. Maybe, you will baby steps. And I really think it's difficult to talk about things, but I'm very interested in teacher-teacher relationships, because I think because of the number of hours in a day that children are there with teachers, children observe that relationship, and therefore it's really important that we work hard at that.
Thank you very much. Okay, so just to sum up our webinar tonight, and we've talked about so many big ideas, and I think for me this idea of the open and honest communication, the being genuine, being yourself, and giving time to relationships, not having that so far down the list of things to do today that you don't ever get to it, have really come across for me as being really important. What would you like to give as a take-home message to people listening tonight from the webinar tonight?
I personally, I think go back to work tomorrow and find out what your co-workers' strengths are, if you don't already know. What are they passionate about? What do they want to achieve? Find out something about your co-teacher you didn't know.
Good. That's great. That's great.
Jean, have you anything to add?
Yeah, for me, it's about engaging in deeper conversations and sharing ideas and sharing your ups and your downs and developing a mutual respect by acknowledging each other's strengths and talents. It can't just be a one-way process. I think we have to discover what makes it a mutual respect. It's been very interesting to think about these issues.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Jean, thank you very much for bringing this topic to the Education Hub, because it is hugely important, and I know our attendees tonight have really enjoyed it. So so thank you both very much. Thank you also for the concrete examples at the end there of what we can go out and do tomorrow. I hope everyone takes that challenge up. So thank you very much, and good evening. Good night.
Kia ora.